Without further ado, I'm going to call the Southborough School Committee open meeting of Wednesday, February 9th, 2022 in session. It is 6:31 p.m. All Southborough School Committee members are present. And first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to just reorder the agenda in a minor fashion. I'm going to move public comments back behind the first new business item. And the first new business item is the Capital Planning Subcommittee presentation. That way, if there's any public comment after that, at least it'll wait till we get through that presentation. So, having done so, who shall I turn this over to? Greg or Jason, how would you like to handle this?
So I think if we turn it over to Jason so he can call the Capital Planning School Research Subcommittee into session.
Yeah. I will do that and acknowledge that Kathy, Couture, and myself constitute the entire subcommittee. And what I'll do very quickly, if Greg has any comments he wants to make before I launch into our presentation and get it on screen, I'm happy to hear any of that before we go forward.
Yeah, I just want to thank the School Research Subcommittee. I think a tremendous amount of work has been done over the past many months. And I think it's been a collaborative partnership kind of moving through the thinking. And just want to thank Kathy Cook and Jason and Couture for their work on the committee and their partnership.
Thank you. With that, I will bring up the slides and go into the presentation. I will be starting the presentation, but we'll certainly be passing the baton as we walk through the slides here. So first, I would like to thank everyone for the opportunity to present here. I know many of the school committee members and members of the school administration have had a chance to interact with our subcommittee over the past year plus that we've been in existence, studying the many things that we're going to discuss tonight. But we are going to try to make this presentation all-encompassing, realizing that many members of the public may be hearing some of these items for the first time tonight. So we'd ask that, especially those of you that have heard some of this before, just bear with us, because we think it's the full story that is going to really help you to make some educated decisions as you move forward based on some of the recommendations that will follow. Start with some brief introductions. I serve as the chair of the town's capital planning committee. I'm joined by one of your school committee members, Katura Martin, as well as Kathy Cook, who chairs the town's advisory committee. Throughout the process, while they weren't voting members, they were present at, I believe, 100% attendance at every one of our public meetings, of which you'll hear we had 21 during this process. The superintendent, Greg Martineau, as well as the assistant superintendent of operations, Keith Lavoie. And I would be remiss to not acknowledge the many guests we had along the way as we went through various iterations of this. I think it's really important to understand, what we're going to discuss tonight. We've broken the presentation down into a few components, just some background in how we came to be, the enrollment data that we use to base some of our decisions and recommendations on, a school administration space needs scenarios and conclusions to understand what we could do with existing infrastructure and what potential may exist for new or renovated infrastructure, a funding analysis, thinking about the potential for an MSBA grant, and our recommendations and next steps of where we would like to see some action from the school committee. Before I launch fully into the presentation, be really important to acknowledge the time and effort that went in, not only from my fellow committee members who had vested interest in this from various angles in our positions within the town in school, some elected, some appointed, but also to acknowledge, as at least the school committee, I'm sure, is very well aware of the challenges that the school administration have had to face in the past few years. As you'll see, this all started literally in and around the week that COVID really started to change our lives. Things started to shut down. Some of the committees started to get formed, and they made time for this, even though they didn't have time. And I really just want to acknowledge, no matter what people's views are on the recommendations that come out of this, I would hope that there's a general, in whether you agree with them or not, that there's just a general consensus and alignment that the school administration in particular here spent the time to study something that needed to be studied for the better of our town, regardless of whether you're a parent of school-age children, regardless of whether you have passed your school-age years in terms of your children, or whether you're a parent of a child that hasn't even entered the Southborough schools. With that, I'm going to speak.
Jason, excuse me for 1 second. I don't know if it's just me, but the slides on the screen aren't advancing. Is anybody else seeing that? I still see just the title side. So I don't know if, I think you're probably intending to go through the slides, but.
I am on my screen. Is it, anyone else weigh in there?
I'm not seeing it either.
I'm not seeing it either.
Okay. Thank you for interrupting me, Katura. I've been scrolling along here, so let me stop sharing and redo this. Can you see the background slide?
Yes.
And can you see me going back now?
Yep, great.
Okay, all right. Please feel free to interrupt me if that happens again.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take some time to understand how this committee came to be. The town of Southborough's Board of Selectmen formed a larger capital planning committee in March 2020 to try to understand and redefine our 10-year capital plan, which had historically been maintained by the town's finance team in collaboration with obviously the school administration and individual department heads. One of the main genesis of why we came together was to try to find ways to break down silos in how the town operated, in terms of every year certain groups advanced their own individual projects without necessarily a full understanding of the impact that it may have on other departments or on overall the town budget in trying to maintain a reasonable tax rate. We quickly identified that there were many aging buildings, both on the town side and the school infrastructure. And when you started looking a couple of years out, it became a very ominous picture. However, we're very fortunate that next year is really the last year of major school debt on our town's financial rolls. There will be some very, very small amounts that will trickle out for another 3 to 4 years beyond that. But a lot of the debt is due to be retired next year. That debt originated with the major projects that occurred 20 to 25 years ago at both Neary, Trottier, Finn, in the construction of Woodward. In this obviously very difficult time, we approached the school committee to revisit a 2013 housing report that had been done by a much larger group than the three of us that you see here tonight, that had looked at trying to answer questions about the school infrastructure for the next 10 years, that had looked at various consolidation scenarios. But I think, as everyone knows, the infrastructure that was there in 2013 is still used very much in the same way that it is today in terms of grade configurations, et cetera. Given that another 7 to 8 years of what I would call steady to slightly declining enrollment, depending upon the year that was occurring, we thought it was time to revisit and make sure that the infrastructure that the schools had were fit for purpose, and obviously needed collaboration, not only amongst the school committee, but the school administration, just to see what some of our paths forward may be. Our overall goal with this was not to favor one group or another. None of us came in with any preconceived notions of where this would end up, but it was really to create a vision and path forward for the town of Southborough in a collaborative fashion instead of siloed planning. On the screen, you will see the charge that was adopted by the Board of Selectmen to, really with what we were asked to undertake. We view tonight as hopefully our last meeting in real true report coming out of this committee, other than finalizing some of our meeting minutes. And we'll give you some suggested actions on how another committee may be able to take our progress forward to assist the town. You know, a brief timeline is always important to understand how long this has been studied and the various steps that we've taken along the way. While the Capital Planning Committee at the town level was formed in March of 2020, it wasn't until October of 2020 that we were able to fully form the group of 3 members that are here tonight. We quickly worked with the school administration to conduct an enrollment study to understand what the future of Southborough school enrollment looked like. We partnered with NESDEC, who had historically performed most school enrollment studies for the town. That was completed in December of 2020, presented to this subcommittee as well as the school committee. There was what I would call significant feedback that was given by both committees at that time, which resulted in a dramatically revised version that came out in February of 2021. At the same time, it became very apparent that the Neary School was going to have capital infrastructure needs that we needed to know the exact timing, i.e. how long could the roof wait, electrical systems, and other infrastructure that's core to the safety of the staff and students that occupy that building on a daily basis. The school administration contracted with an external third party, Vertex, that was very familiar with the town, having been the owner's project manager for the recently completed public safety building. And they issued a 100+ page report indicating that there was approximately $4 to $5 million in current dollars of needs that would need to be dealt with in the next 5 years just to keep the building operational. As you can imagine, as the timeline of our work continued to push out and people became anxious to advance other projects in the community, both school and non-school related, we issued an update letter to the community in June of 2021 that was collaborative between both town and school boards. In the fall, the superintendent went down 2 paths. One, our committee was not comfortable, nor was the school administration, with the work that NESDEC had done based on the significant swings in data that had occurred. And we found a different demographer, which you'll hear more commonly referred during this presentation as RLS, to assist us with a secondary review. At the same time, Greg and his school administration team started to review the existing space and understand what potential grade configurations could occur in our existing infrastructure, taking into account a variety of factors that we'll hear more about shortly. Obviously, we are here tonight to present our findings and recommendations, and looking forward, really think that this will hopefully chart the path forward to a placeholder article that is already sitting on the annual town meeting warrant for a potential feasibility study to discuss the next steps related to the Neary School. With that, I am going to turn the floor to Keturah and Greg to walk through some of our enrollment data, and certainly feel free to prompt me along the way if you need me to advance anything.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So as Jason mentioned, Greg and I are going to present the next couple of sections of the presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data that we received from the enrollment projection studies, and then Greg's going to go over the various configuration scenarios that we looked at in terms of how to allocate grades within different buildings, and he'll also go over the scenario that we're recommending as a starting point for moving forward to next steps. So as far as the enrollment goes, I mean, obviously one of the key aspects of planning for school building space is the number of students who are enrolled. As Jason summarized, the initial report was done by NESDEC, New England School Development Council, which is a nonprofit group that uses sort of a standard formula for making student enrollment projections for towns and cities around New England. We did receive an initial report from them, and as Jason mentioned, there were a number of questions. The report was revised. The data was greatly changed as a result of the revisions. And so we ended up commissioning a second report because of the importance of having data that we can feel comfortable with from RLS. RLS Demographics is a demography firm that specializes in taking a close look at demographic trends of the specific areas being analyzed. So they did a sort of a more detailed report and analysis of Southborough in particular. And you can see that the difference in the projections where NESDEC projected about 1,092 students by 2030 and RLS projected 1,237 in the K-8 grade range. The RLS methodology, for those of you, again, who were at the school committee meetings where this was all presented, this will be a little bit of a repeat, but their methodology seemed to be just more reliable and more specific to our area and statistically more sound. They focused a lot on fertility rate and live, which is more or less the same as saying live births, and also migration. So the patterns of people moving in and out of the town. And I don't want to go too much into the weeds, but one of the things they use, which I know we ended up talking about quite a bit, was the grade progression ratio model, where they look at the change in student class sizes from grade to grade, which takes into account other movement within the town in and out. And so it just really seemed to be a sound rationale. So we decided to move forward with that report and the data in that report. And then one aspect of both reports actually that wasn't factored in, because it's really more of an unknown and very hard to quantify, would be the effect that any additional housing development in the town would have on the student enrollment population. And to account for that possibility, what we did moving forward was we added in a 10%, basically a buffer onto the numbers of the RLS report. So Jason, you want to move to the next slide. And that's what's represented here on this slide. On the left, you see it's a theoretical decrease if somehow that were to happen, which doesn't seem, that wasn't projected at all in the RLS study, but just for, I guess, the sake of being comprehensive. But on the right, you see the 10% increase that we're using to account for any fluctuation or higher than what the projections show. So that results in a total student population for K-8 by 2030 of 1,315. And RLS has said that they will be able to update this with real information as we move forward, because obviously what we're talking about here is a path that will last years. So as long as, we would be in the planning stages of anything, we can use updated enrollment projection data, which would reflect actual enrollment of the year that we're currently in, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I will kick it off to Greg to go over the space needs scenarios and conclusions.
Thank you, Katura. So at an October special school committee meeting, the district presented its space needs analysis report to the school committee. And I just want to let the audience know that that report is available on the district website under the school committee's webpage. And for this evening's presentation, Assistant Superintendent Lavoie and I will review the scenarios that were analyzed and identify a recommendation conclusion for each scenario studied. And in each of the scenarios, we evaluated them against a set of criteria. And the criteria that were used are meets occupancy permit, meets septic capacity, space requirements, maximizes teacher collaboration, maximizes resources, people's materials and instructional resources, and minimizes student transitions. And additionally, the RLS demographic data that Katura just presented was used for these scenarios. And we used the data projections for 2030 with the additional 10% increase in fertility and mobility. The first scenario focused on keeping the current grade configuration pre-K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 8. And I think that I think there was a lot of confirmation from the parents that parents would like to see less transitions for their school-age children. Currently, there are many transitions. Students are either being welcomed into a school or being prepared for the next transition. So I think it's important that the future work is studying long-term impact to school department budgets if an elementary school were to be eliminated. And I think the recommendation is we need to have serious consideration in terms of needs to be given to move away from the model of the 3 elementary schools in 1 middle school. In terms of the next scenario, is to decommission Neary and consolidate an elementary at Finn and Woodward. And the benefits of this particular scenario is that reduces transitions, increases collaboration for educators, and really maximizes the use of resources. In particular, at Finn School, it maximizes the use of existing space as an early childhood center, and the ability exists to add on in future if additional space is required. At Neary School, the advantages is that it eliminates the need for renovation and new construction, and it would also eliminate a campus for schools, which is a concern, leaving 3 independent locations. In terms of the Woodward School, the facility is landlocked, as many of you know, and there's little or no ability to expand if future growth occurs. And also, as indicated in the table, it does not meet occupancy permit in this scenario. Not central to other school or creating continued logistical challenges, particularly related to busing. So again, having 3 locations and particular location of Woodward can make it challenging due to its location near the center of town. And then lastly, in terms of the town needs, it does not help with infrastructure for town needs other than a potential parcel of land freeing up if using this existing Neary footprint. At this point, I will turn it over to Keith Lavoie, who will present scenario C.
Thank you, Greg. In line with some of the other scenarios that have been reviewed, this particular scenario reviewed the decommissioning of Neary and the moving of the 5th grade to the Trottier Middle School. And as you can see from the chart there are 2 sides of this. One, whether something was physically possible and whether or not something was a strong programmatic move for our school system and our district related to programming. So as you can see from this, it did allow for the capacity limits to not be exceeded. But when it came to the programmatic side, that's the part that I want to focus on. Jason, I think you can advance it. So the recommendation would be not to further consider this recommendation for the following reasons. First, although there is enough space at Trottier, adding the 5th grade to an already existing 6th through 8th grade middle school would not be a sound decision for the programmatic needs of our students. Right now, as it stands, having 6th grade and 8th grade in the same building is a perfect connection. As students come in, they have an opportunity to really grow and then exit into the high school fully prepared. Adding the 5th grade to the middle school would create another layer of different instructional needs for the students that would need to be addressed, and it'd be very difficult to do that within the same building. Likewise, it would, although reduce the number of transitions, programmatically would be the real reason why this would not be recommended for further use. Although there is extra space at Trottier, there are a variety of different ways that it could be utilized, and I know that'll be part of future investigations if needed. Thank you. I think we'll move on to scenario D.
So scenario D is to decommission Woodward and consolidate elementary at Finn and Neary. And really the scenario is a pre-K grade 2, which is Finn, and grade 3 through 5 at Neary, and grades 6 through 8 at Trottier. The second scenario in terms of D2 is again, decommission Woodward, consolidate elementary at Finn and Neary. However, rather than a pre-K through grade 2, it would be a pre-K through grade 1 at Finn, leaving it an early childhood center and having a grade 2 through 5 at Neary and a grade 6 through 8 at Trotter. So there are many benefits to this particular, these scenarios. First, it reduces the transitions, increases collaboration, and maximizes the use of resources. In particular, at Finn School, it maximizes the use of existing space as an early childhood education center. And again, as stated in an earlier scenario, the ability exists to add on in future if additional space is required. At Neary School is in need of significant renovations and upgrades. And I think that Neary School can be designed to meet space requirements of grades 2 through 5. It continues the campus approach with Trotter. And again, the ability to add on if future needs, if space is required, exists. And then at Woodward School, it's centrally located for town reuse and solves space need requirements of town departments and allows for decommissioning of town buildings, as well as creates opportunities for a community center using existing infrastructure. And again, the full space needs analysis report is available on the district website under the Southborough School Committee's website tab. And at this point, I will turn it over to Kathy Cook for financial analysis.
Hi, everyone. Before I get into the financial piece, I wanted to add a couple of background facts for everyone, since other than Roger, I think everybody that's on the school committee would not have been part of the 2013 study that was done. I was on the committee. As Jason said, it was a much larger committee than our 5-person committee. At that time, we concluded that you could close the school. Even back then, the school committee, we didn't recommend closing the school. We basically presented the data to the school committee. The school committee voted not to close the school in 2013, but there were 2 major differences back then that I think is important to understand as to why things are probably different in 2021. The first one was, if we were to have closed the school back in 13-14, the school that would have had to have been closed would have been Neary. Woodward was still in the middle of paying its bond off that was issued to fund it, which meant that we were still in the middle of receiving the reimbursement from the state for their piece of the construction cost. If we had closed Woodward in 2013, we would have lost that, and that number was over $10 million at that time. So that was not even a consideration back then. Ironically, the people on that committee, there was a whole lot of, there was teachers, Linda Murdoch, the ex-Trotter principal was on it, several school committee members. The majority of the group there really liked Neary a lot and seemed to prefer Neary over Woodward, which always surprised me. I don't know if that's a feeling today, but it definitely was a feeling back then. The second thing that we have on the table today that we did not have back then is we didn't focus on what we would do with a closed school in 2013. It wasn't anything we were charged with, so it wasn't even a consideration. Today, that's very much part of this discussion because the town has a significant list of pent-up capital needs that a building could help solve the problem for. So I just want to make sure I mentioned that before I got into the financial piece of it. Okay, so you may recall Jason, when he first started, used the acronym MSBA, Massachusetts School Building Authority. That is the state quasi-independent agency that helps towns fund new or renovated public school buildings. The amount of financing that they can provide is no less than 31% of eligible cost, and I'm going to emphasize the word eligible and come back to it, up to 80%. So their contribution can be significant. When we first started our committee work, we had heard a story about a project where they forewent MSBA funding. which made us sit up and wonder why anyone would give up free money from the state. What would be the reason you would do that? It didn't seem to be intuitive. So we wanted to make sure we at least looked at it, understood the process today as far as what the MSBA offers, to make sure that we make a good, solid decision as far as whether to participate in that process, because if we do that, we're going to have to follow the rules, et cetera. So we spent some time with the help of an outside consultant looking at the MSBA process and concluded that the only downside of participating is that the length of time to finish construction could be extended by from 2 to 3 years, which could be significant as far as the ultimate cost of the project. As we all know, today we are hearing stories about rampant inflation. It's higher than it's been in 40 years. Well, that inflation applies to construction cost too. So therefore, by delaying a project 2 to 3 years, you actually could end up spending more money on the project, even with the MSBA reimbursement, than you would if you did not participate with MSBA and built it on your own with the town money completely, but got it done 2 years earlier. So that's where we are at this point. We don't know what the answer is. We also don't know exactly what we're going to get from MSBA if we are allowed to participate. So as of today, there are 11 projects on the table that MSBA is considering to fund that were as a result of applications made last year. So we're one of the 11. So we've made the first cut. We expect to hear back from the MSBA no later than March 3rd, which is our next official meeting. We actually think we're going to hear a little bit before. I wish we'd heard by tonight, but we didn't. So we're going to hear very soon whether they've accepted us into the process. If they don't, then we will have a chance to reapply for next year. Decision hasn't been made to do that, but that's kind of where we stand as far as the process goes. So we don't know tonight whether we will be accepted or not, but assuming for a moment that we are, we believe that the ultimate effective reimbursement rate on cost is somewhere between 15 and 20% of total cost. We don't know what the cost of the project is going to be because we don't know what the project is yet. We don't know whether we're going to end up asking the town to build a whole new NERI, to renovate a NERI, partially renovate a NERI. So we don't know what the cost is, but we do know the cost is significant. Construction costs have gone up a lot. So I went back and looked at what we paid for the 3 prior schools that were built using the MSBA predecessor program, and we were able to recoup 58% effectively of those costs. Our reimbursement rate was 63%. They did not pick up all the costs. So by the time we were done with that project, we did get 58% back from the state. So it's quite a bit of difference between 15 to 20% and 58%. So this will be a very expensive project to the town any way we do it. There are situations for those that are involved in construction, you probably know this, where renovating a structure can cost as much or more than just tearing it down or starting all over. So we won't know what the total cost is until we get through the feasibility phase of the project, which would be the next phase if the school committee decides to go forward with this and then the town votes to fund that first phase. So that's what we can tell you tonight. But the takeaway from this is that MSBA funding can extend the life of the construction project significantly, so that in terms of cost, with the escalation of costs we see today, we actually could end up possibly paying more by using it. We won't know till we get much further down the process. So the jury's still out as far as whether we want to use MSBA funding or not. We still have the chance to say no, even if they were to admit us. But at some point we'll have to say, yes, we're going to do that. So we've got a lot more work to do to decide whether to do or not, but we do feel like we at least understand the pros and cons of using MSBA process and then their funding. Jason, back to you.
Thank you, Kathy. So now for our recommendations and next steps, then happy to take any questions. So after hearing all this and studying this for well over a year, our committee voted unanimously that the Southborough Public Schools can be consolidated from 4 to 3 schools if the appropriate infrastructure is put into place for the Neary School. Our recommendation on how to advance that conclusion is to pursue a comprehensive plan looking at the Neary School in particular to add grades 2 and 3 and basically leave pre-K to 1 at the Finn School and leave grades 6 through 8 at the Trotter School. A main thing to really reemphasize on this slide, just to make sure it came through in some of the earlier discussion, is the fact that universal pre-K may be in our not too distant future in terms of what is required by federal or state governments. And this plan would give us the ability to accommodate that with existing infrastructure. We also believe that this plan is appropriate to not limit the potential for future growth in Southborough if that were to occur by organizing all of our infrastructure around flat parceled lands that have the ability to be expanded if the need were to ever occur. So really not putting the town in a bind in consolidating too much, which my understanding was likely some of the trepidation around some of these plans in the past, absent all the things that have been mentioned in earlier presentation by Kathy. It is important to walk away here when I get to the next step slide, doing something tonight and starting to advance the ball forward on some of the recommendations that we've made. And it's important not to let this slide months or years. The important part is to take action now. And the main reason are as follows. The Neary School, as I mentioned before, requires over $4 million of immediate capital needs in the next 5 years to keep it functioning as a safe facility for our students and our staff. The building has a valuation currently that is just north of $8 million per the town's assessor. Projects of that amount alone, which is mainly roof, electrical infrastructure alone, will trip the need to not only bring the building up full ADA compliance, but for many other safety needs in the town that would be required by state building code that will well exceed the number that you see on the screen. It also, we can't put a dollar amount on this, would leave us with a lost opportunity to really bring this particular school facility up to current educational standards well beyond the safety standards that I've previously mentioned. The superintendent mentioned the school transitions. We've heard countless times throughout our study, and as parents of kids of a variety of ages in the schools and have advanced beyond the Southborough schools, this is arguably one of the most discussed topics among school-age parents in Southborough. And you've heard some of the educational reasons behind it from the superintendent tonight. This also gives us a one-time opportunity to consolidate all of our operations into 3 facilities, such that future generations will be faced with a need to maintain 3 facilities as opposed to 4. This is important because we can mobilize around one major capital article that will cover us for the next 20 to 25 years within our town. Of course, there will be regular things that will be needed at remaining schools if this plan were to move forward in terms of Finn and Trotter, in terms of roofs, paving, and regular maintenance to maintain a facility of those size. But this would be the single largest item, and you could mobilize around one project as opposed to many projects at individual times in individual schools. We've also already had discussion on the town side. As many are aware, there was a presentation a few weeks ago to the town's capital planning committee about what Woodward could be repurposed for, and there continues to be active dialogue around that. The reason that is important is it was a key question that came out of the MSBA interview process that some of us participated in back in the fall. They are fully aware of what may happen if they were to fund a Neary project and have specifically asked to understand how the town would repurpose existing infrastructure. The reason that's important is the MSBA looks at projects that have broad community support and chance for success on town meeting floor and ultimately the ballot. So they are mobilizing their resources around projects that are actually going to become actual infrastructure. So that decision to do that was not one that was made in a silo, but one that is part of a broader plan to understand the needs. As we've re-emphasized in some of those presentations, that plan is really still at phase 0 and still in the user feedback phase, but it can't go anywhere with that action here. It also allows us to repurpose capital that we kind of have placeholders for, specifically related to Corderville Hall and the South Union School over the next 10 years, to think about ways to repurpose or dispose of that excess space so that we can redeploy the capital that we were planning to spend there on better infrastructure. So where that leaves us is, and really what we'd like discussion amongst the committee and certainly the public tonight is confirmation that the school committee has the data they need and basically validates the work that this subcommittee has performed to mobilize around it the current Neary site as an elementary school subject to a feasibility study looking at new versus renovation to accommodate grades 2 through 5. To do that, we'd strongly recommend that you expeditiously form a Neary School Building Committee so that they could more formally come up with a plan and also react to MSBA's decision on March 3rd of whether to advance the Neary School project or not. We'd also recommend simultaneously continuing to have that new school building committee articulate a need to town meeting to obtain feasibility study money to further advance this with the use of owner's project manager, designer, and any other resources that would be needed to bring an ultimate capital project to the town. We obviously are in a unique situation now where the town has received approximately $3.1 million of ARPA funding. The Board of Selectmen have formed a ARPA committee that is currently reviewing proposals. Given that this is an item that's already on the town's capital plan, we would strongly recommend that you consider whether you make a request to that committee to fund a portion or all of this current feasibility study. Obviously realizing that there are many requests coming their way that would fully utilize that amount, but I think we are in an environment that request could be made if that was the will of the school committee. This next part is important. This process is really the start, and there is a tremendous amount of public input that needs to be gathered. There will certainly be questions around the cost, but it's too early to project the cost, as Kathy mentioned. But we do have a lot of frequently asked questions that are already posed to us as committee members, members of the public, and also on various sites in town. We feel it's important to start to gather those questions and really formulate an FAQ document. If you look at any school building committee in any of our neighboring communities that have gone through this, this is an important part of the education process to inform voters so that they can make an informed decision, both at town meeting and at the polls. Simultaneously, obviously, if the town were to mobilize around a Neary school project, we would appreciate the school committee's endorsement of the plan that if the appropriate infrastructure was put into place at the Neary school, that you would agree to a plan after completion of the Neary infrastructure to close the Woodward School and transfer the custody of that building to the town for municipal purposes, primarily as a community center. In the backdrop of all of this, like I've mentioned a few times, and my fellow committee members have mentioned at various points in time during their presentation, the town's capital planning committee will continue to look at funding scenarios of all of this, taking into account some of the levers that we may or may not be able to pull to bring forward the most financially responsible plan to the town that clearly deals with the needs of the school infrastructure, but more broadly accomplishes the needs of many other buildings in this town, primarily our senior center, our library, indoor recreation space, and ongoing municipal needs in collaboration with the schools. So with that, that closes our presentation. and happy to turn the floor back to you, Roger, to moderate Q&A.
Thank you very much. Before I turn it over to the committee to see if there are any questions, I would like to say this and thank your committee. I mean, I've obviously, well, whether it's obvious or not, I've been involved in certain stages and certain information that's been provided along the way. But I thought the presentation tonight was extraordinarily clear, and complete, and I know you all have worked incredibly hard on this committee to get it to this point. I'm going to ask a question which may be probably very premature, because I realize that it's yet to be determined whether if such a project goes forward, it would be a renovate or a build. And I think one of the things that parents are always very interested in, and I'm presuming it'll be in the frequently asked questions at some point in time, is if it's a build, new build, and that, let's say it occurs on somewhere in the current grounds, maybe next to, you don't have the issues of what happens to the students that are in a school when it's under renovation. If it's a renovation, then you get into having to deal with those kinds of questions, which I'm sure you'll get if that turns out to be the case. So it's not really a question. It's just I don't know if there's anyone on the committee that you've discussed this at all. I know it's very premature. Maybe it's premature.
We actually have for about 5 minutes at least currently. The question came up when we were speaking with Vertex, who was assisting us with some of the analysis. And two things came out of it is they cited many neighboring communities. I believe Westborough was the example given, where they actually just built a school very close to an existing school. I think one was uphill, one was downhill, was the example that was cited. I would think that this would be one of the first items that a school building committee, though, would tackle, because I think there's other logistical challenge that you'd have to collaborate, particularly with your fire chief and building inspector, on to make sure that obviously safety would be able to be maintained at all times for appropriate access of their equipment, et cetera. And I also think all of the projections here that we have shown tonight are 2030. So once you actually have a timeline on a building schedule, you also would know what you have in your existing infrastructure. In particular, as you know, the superintendent's office maintains about 6 to 7 classrooms currently at Neary. So you could start to think about phasing of move out to that building. Again, very premature, but certain things that you could certainly put into motion once a school building committee had kind of formalized and could start to see a timeline of how this would materialize. I know, Kathy, I just saw your hand. Sorry if you had anything to add to that.
So to add to that, Roger, one of the requirements of participating in the MSBA process, if we're invited and we accept, is that they require you to look at, the reason it takes longer, one of the reasons, you've got to look at all possible permutations of this project. New, partial, full renovation. So they force you to think about every way you could do this project, which is probably a good thing. It will, I hope, satisfy the town people, the residents, that we have truly looked at this every way we can, because there's going to be some people that think, why, it's a good school, why can't you just spend a little money on it? Others may think it's not such a great school, it's 50 years old, let's just start all over. So we would have to look at all ways to do this if we are going to do this through the MSBA.
That makes sense. Thank you. So did anybody else on your committee want to add anything, Jason or Katura or you, or shall I invite the members to ask questions if they have any? This was a very complete presentation, I thought, and as I say, some of us have seen parts of this process as it has moved along. All right, Kamali.
Yes. Jason, you talked about neighboring communities that have had that you compared this to. Could you talk about those? I don't know if they were consolidating buildings or just they did studies. What was the what were those neighboring communities?
My reference to neighboring communities was primarily around phasing of construction. Our analysis solely focused on the data we had for Southborough. I'm sure the superintendent could certainly speak to grade configurations that exist in other communities, but our committee specifically focused on the needs of Southborough and tried not to draw in another community's needs to this.
And then I'd have another follow-up question, which is around this is a little bit early, but it's something to consider that as we make this decision, one from the school committee, but then secondly at the town level, there's a lot of feedback that we'll probably receive in terms of the impact to property, to taxes that the residents are paying in order for this to be executed. And is the explanation solely going to be around the, is it going to use the example from the work that was done 20 years ago and how, that was kind of put into the town's budget over time? So can you tell me a little bit about any thoughts or conversations you guys have had with that?
Yeah, so it's certainly premature to throw out numbers, as you've noted. We need a feasibility study related to NERI to understand the true cost. And once you can understand that true cost, it really allows you to bring it all together of, if every person or committee went for themselves, I'm just going to give you an example of at least how I've thought about it and welcome feedback from others. If the school committee says we need a new NERI, we need to do a massive project at NERI, that project probably moves forward regardless of what the rest of the town says, right? It's subject to town meeting funding, et cetera. We then have a group of seniors, the Council on Aging, that are looking for enhanced space at the senior center, whether it be additional space, new space, renovated, right? That's subject to discussion. You also have a library that it has been deemed too small for current needs of a library. We also have other town departments that are operating in less than ideal situations to conduct the business of the town. If we did each of those individually, that would add up to a number that I think we all know no one would have a stomach to tolerate in the town. So what we're trying to do is put those puzzle pieces together to come up with the most responsible one. Any project would certainly be bonded over a significant amount of time. So as you noted, we're just paying off Woodward now, but that was a project that was 20 years ago. So that will be an important consideration. But we also have to look at the fact that we have debt that's on our books now that will roll off. So you have to, all of that has to kind of come together. But there's no doubt it would increase taxes. Like I just don't see a situation how it doesn't. It's just how do you do it in a financially responsible way so that we can keep, obviously, NERI still operating as a school, because we've shown that you can't just consolidate the students to Finn and Woodward and move on, and also accomplish the needs of many other user groups. And one of the things we studied and spent a lot of time with is our seniors are actually making up a greater portion of our population than they used to when the last study was done. So my job, at least from a capital planning perspective, is to find a way to balance all of that, to find the appropriate path forward and to be able to articulate that. But I see Kathy, you have your hand up and obviously have a wealth of knowledge from an advisory perspective.
So Kamali, I would add to what Jason said. I agree with everything he said, is that as part of the presentation to the town, when the town is, if we get this far, is being asked to approve this significant project, we will estimate the impact on residential real estate tax bills. Jason said, obviously they're going to increase. So, are they going to increase on a net basis? We don't know. They certainly will. Your taxes will be more than they would have been without the project for sure. But because of the other debt that's being removed, we don't know. We truly don't know what the net impact would be, but that will be part of that presentation to make sure it's clear that people understand what the impact on their tax bill is, because it will certainly be asked. There's no doubt about that. And another thing to keep in mind that I don't know if we made it clear tonight, we started off with a decision tree as far as all the different ways we could go here, yes or no, and kept going down the branches. One of the things that we've all agreed on all along is if NERI is going to remain a viable school, there's going to be significant money spent on it one way or the other. It's 50 years old. So there is going to be a significant capital outlay for NERI, whether you close a school or not. So that is something that you should keep in the back of your mind. So there's a floor that we're going to spend no matter what on NERI if it's going to remain as a school.
Thank you both. Thank you both for answering that. One of the things that you asked for is just kind of a answer as to whether or not, I've received everything that I needed. That was one of the last comments or questions. And I think, yes, both between tonight's presentation and the capital planning meeting where the consultants came in and gave that presentation, I think that this is the right amounts and an excellent delivery of information for us to decide on. So thank you.
I see your hand up, but let me just make a comment before I forget it. It goes back to one of the things that Jason identified as far as capital requirements for NERI and the percentage of the valuation of NERI that those capital improvements would require, basically being over 50%, and that would then trigger an overall ADA compliancy, process. And I can tell you that one of the reasons that I've seen renovation projects sometimes cost more than a new build is because once you get into it, you don't really know what you're going to get into until you get there. And there's a lot of exposure. Just a quick comment on that. Anyway, Kim.
Thank you guys for this presentation. It was excellent, I think. I just have two quick questions. The first is, Jason, you said the timeline is like to 2030. Is that correct? So, but we have an estimate of like what NERI needs over the next 5 years. Like, how does that sort of work?
So all of the enrollment, so all of the data that Keturah and Greg and Keith spoke to, we're looking out to the fall of 2030 in terms of enrollments.
Okay.
From a capital planning perspective, so that's how we decided whether you have the appropriate amount of space or not. Okay. What we then spent time doing is saying, we know a project, you're not just going to stand up a school tomorrow or renovate a school tomorrow. There's obviously an incredibly iterative process that's going to take years, at least 5, right, to see all of this get done. And that's assuming like really good success at town meeting in the polls. We said there's going to be a point where the school administration is going to need to do something. What is that something they would need to do? Because they're relying on that to house those 2 grades currently. That was the magic of that 5 years.
So basically we would want this project done before we have to do any of those major improvements for safety, right? Is that the idea?
That's the most fiscally responsible way to do it, because you're taking out inflationary pressures and you're also balancing not putting, I'll just use an example, putting a roof on a school and then deciding that you're going to tear it down
right.
3, 4, 5 years later.
Okay. And then the second question, last question, Kathy, you mentioned that at some point there'll be an estimate of the net impact on taxes and property taxes. Is that at the end of the feasibility study? Or
Yes.
is that like farther down the road? Okay, so
there'll be an estimate at that point, because then you've got to go to the town and say, this is the estimate. If you remember how the public safety building project works. So yes, there will be an estimate based on the architect's information and his work. So yes, there will be an estimate that will get voted on because you've got to tell the town what you think the cost is up front. It won't be perfect. The actual number will be more or less, but yes, there will be an estimate at the end of the feasibility period. But Kim, I wanted to add one more thing too, as far as what Jason was saying, as far as timing goes. So this is what we think the timing might look like for a newly built NERI. If we don't use MSBA, we think the earliest it would be ready would be January 1st of 26, and that's assuming everything goes swimmingly, which it doesn't always do. If we were to participate in MSBA, we think that adds 2 years to it. So we're talking January 1st, 28. So your question about, yeah, wouldn't it be nice to make sure we get this done before we have to spend money on NERI that we then kind of throw away? The answer would be yes, we'd like to, but we may not be able to either way. It just depends. I mean, if you're not going to let the roof fall in. So we would hope that we can avoid some capital expenses with the project if it's approved, but it all depends on the timing. And it's still, either way, it's still pretty far down the road before you're ready to truly move in.
okay, thank you. And just to sort of piggyback on Kamali, this presentation was excellent, and I have all the information that I need to support moving to the next level.
Anyone else? I guess, Jen, are you all set? Because I think we've all weighed in so far. I don't expect Katura would have any questions, but she might. So I see your hand up, Jen.
This is just a point of clarification. So moving on to the next step would be supporting essentially the feasibility study is what we're being asked. I mean, it's hard. I don't have a huge amount of questions yet because I think the big questions are really around financial and budget pieces, which we don't have the details of. But I think that's really important. I just one other piece is that you said that NERI has the space already. Is that correct from one of those plans? Without, I mean, the renovations are not to add space to it, or the renovations are to include classroom space.
So in the scenarios of consolidating,
yeah,
we need to do something to NERI. So there is not the space at NERI to implement a grade consolidation.
Okay, thank you.
It's like 3 through 5 or a 2 through 5.
If I may just clarify Jen's first comment about not only supporting a feasibility for NERI, but getting a building committee that has the right expertise to oversee that, which would certainly involve members of the school committee, but it's I'm sure the superintendent in his next agenda topic will go through what the required membership would be there.
And that would be to include things like an evaluation of like the gym space and cafeteria and all of that too, right? Everything.
It'd be starting from scratch. What does that need to house grades 2 to 5 or any combination thereof?
Thank you.
I don't see.
Can I add to that, Roger?
Sure, please, absolutely.
So, Jennifer, this is fairly factual based. So the MSBA allows 150 square feet per student. They think that's the right number. So if you use that and we use our 2030 demographic projections that are, we've put a cushion in. So we're using the cushion numbers. The NERI school would increase pretty significantly. You'd go from maybe what today I think is 67,000 to maybe 90 to 100,000 square feet. So it would be significantly increased in size.
You good, Jen? Okay, Katura. I was wrong.
I just, the longer I sit here, the more I have comments. So no, I don't have any questions. I did just want to say that I know there's been some concern. I've heard some concern out in the community about the idea of decommissioning Woodward as a school. And I hope that the presentation tonight and the proposed path that's been laid forward makes it clear that it's not just taking all the students from Woodward and finding other places to fit them and doing that, but it would be in conjunction with a plan moving forward for a good educational space for all the students. So it's been, and I also just wanted to thank Jason and Kathy for Jason also primarily on the work on the presentation. He did a fantastic job putting it together, and I think he deserves just some thanks for that. So.
I do not see any more hands up. All right, and again, I'll thank this committee. I thank you for this presentation, and shout out to Jason, as Katura suggested, for his work on this presentation. It was just excellent. So the next item on the agenda will be the audience sharing, which I moved down past this first item. We do have an audience sharing section at the end of this, but for now, feel free to either share a general school committee comment if you want to identify something to the school committee, or something related to this presentation for Jason. I see Ben Carangelli. How do we promote him?
Greg, I'll take care of it.
So Keith, I already, just in case we're double.
Ben, I see you here, but you're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, how you doing, everyone? Ben Garangelli. I live here in Southborough on Central Street. I'd like to start off by saying I'm very disappointed the way this meeting started. You know, you have an agenda set for this meeting. These meetings, for some reason, are only on Zoom. And you rearranged the agenda right at the beginning of the meeting on really one of, the biggest news days relative to schools that we've had in a long, long time. I thought that was completely inappropriate, and I wanted to point that out. I'm really just here to, state that I think you need to, reorient, your entire focus. I appreciate the fact that there was a, big presentation done. I know people that dropped off the meeting already because they couldn't make it anymore. They had planned their time. And that's primarily what I wanted to say. I think you need to, as, given the news of today, and as we start to move forward, I think this entire committee needs to really focus on the healing, the mental health of the students. This is nowhere near the end of this, this pandemic. The hard road starts now, and that's really all I had to say. I think everybody needs to get a little refocus. I appreciate there's a lot of big agenda items coming up on these school committees, but the big focus needs to be on the children, the mental health, devoting all the fiscal and and human resources to the children. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more audience members that would like to share? All right. So let us move on to the second item as we really are moving down the original agenda. The only change had been that audience sharing, which is the establishment or the establishing a school building committee. Greg, do you want me to try to start this off? How would you like to proceed on this? We
sure,
haven't.
I can give a little bit of background and then turn it back to you, Roger.
Okay.
I think part of the recommendation of the Town Capital Planning School Research Subcommittee was for the school committee to consider forming a school building committee to take the next steps. One of my recommendations is that we have not heard from MSBA in terms of whether we've been invited into the eligibility phase. However, MSBA does have clear guidelines around if we're invited, what a school building committee should entail and what the members should look like. My recommendation to the school committee is to mirror a school building committee with similar membership in preparation for a potential invite into the eligibility phase, where then we'd have to form a building committee anyway. So Roger, I do have a charge to form a building committee that I'd like to just share with the committee, and it might be a good starting point for discussion.
Great. Let me also let me communicate my simple definition of what a charge is, as Greg shares it. It's basically related to establishing a school building committee. The charge is really what it is, what does it do, how does it do it, and who would be on it. Now, however, what we don't do as a school committee is we don't choose who is on it. If we basically agree to this charge, the next step really moves to the select board. And the select board certainly has the ability to change this. They would be the ones that select the members and then move forward from that. So this is really just the first step, but this needs to happen before we get to the second step. Shall we, do you want to run down this, Greg? You want me to run down it?
Sure. So I think why don't we move to your comment, Roger, why don't we move to the membership just so we can kind of review the membership, and then we can go back to reviewing the scope. So in terms of the recommended membership, and again, this mirrors MSBA's school building committee guide, is ex officio members, the superintendent of schools, assistant superintendent of operations, assistant superintendent of schools, teaching and learning, school director of finance, principal, town administrator, school facilities director, and town treasurer or finance director. And then in terms of voting members, it would include 2 school committee members, a select board member, an advisory committee member, a capital planning committee member, and 2 residents at large, preferably residents with architectural engineering and or construction experience.
And the voting member.
Roger, I think you're muffled a bit.
My back to not muffled. Greg?
Better, that's better, thank you.
I think I keep putting papers on my microphone somehow. All right. So those voting members add up to 7.
Correct. So if you'd like, Roger, I could read through this.
Thank you. And I think, Greg, you also mentioned, so this is going to conform somewhat to MSBA. You know, they require some degree of conformity. They do allow us to have some leeway, but if we get too far away from what they allow, then we sort of take ourselves out of that, you know, out of that situation, which we would not want to do.
Correct. I think until a decision is made, or whether, you know, we're invited into the eligibility phase of MSB, I think makes logical sense to mirror the processes moving forward. So the charge would be the Neary School Building Committee shall be an ad hoc committee, all appointed by the Select Board. Initially, the School Building Committee shall be responsible for conducting a feasibility study into the options for renovations or new construction at the existing Neary School site. Specific emphasis should be placed on understanding the work and recommendations of the Capital Planning Committee, School Research Subcommittee, in coordination with the school administration. Updates to this charge should be made as the project progresses to better outline the scope of responsibilities of the School Building Committee. If the project is selected into the Mass School Building Authority eligibility phase, then the School Building Committee shall ensure compliance and coordination with any statutes and regulations related to MSBA projects. The School Building Committee shall provide updates on their progress at least quarterly to both the Southborough School Committee and Select Board. The voting position shall be filled by residents of the community who are willing to volunteer their time. And all ex officio roles are required to be filled to maintain compliance with MSBA regulations. These positions will not count toward the quorum, nor will they have a vote on the committee matters. All initial appointments should be through June 30th, 2023, and renewed annually after that date. And then again, we reviewed the membership.
Again, the appointments are made by the Select Board.
Correct.
Do we have any questions from any committee members on the charge itself? Kim.
So the MSBA has like the, I think in our packet was a link to the sort of their suggestions. Or like there's some flexibility there then?
Correct.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so basically we want to make sure we mirror the membership. So basically the form that we would need to provide MSBA in terms of who is appointed to the School Building Committee would be an easy transition to a different form. And I did have conversations with MSBA about, you know, if we were invited in, how we should proceed with this matter, and they concurred.
So like the designations that they had listed, we're able to like flexible with, like if we don't do one of those, or we could add them later or whatever.
Yeah,
I think we already have tweaked it a bit.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, that's all.
Molly?
That last piece that Kim was asking, can we edit the charge to add one more role? So we have 7 roles right now. If at a later time, before starting, we feel like there's need to add one more role, is that, can you do that after we approve the charge?
Yes.
Okay.
And the Select Board may well weigh in on this also, as far as possible modifications.
Mm-hmm. But to start, I think that the list is good. It's a good start.
Can we go back to you sharing that, Greg, for a second, please? And maybe down to I guess the voting members. All right, so I think what, any other questions on this? I think what we really are asked to do would be to have a vote to approve this charge, if there are no modifications to it. All right, can you, well, I think I have a copy of it anyway.
The piece highlighted in yellow, oh, Roger?
Say that again?
The portion highlighted in yellow is...
Yeah, I'm not sure that was a, well, in other words, that's a discussion we can have tonight, or something that can be added in the future. It's important to have an odd number, I think.
Okay.
So this seemed like a good starting place, and also relatively consistent with MSBA's template, I guess I'll call it.
I guess I would just offer to the rest of the committee members that one area I see that may not be addressed is someone that is either has expertise or in ADA compliance. It's not necessarily that the persons that are architects, engineers, construction experience have that, and we would want that lens taken into consideration for this type of build out. If the residents at large did have that, then great. We kind of it's embedded, but that's just one area where I see that it would be good to we left room that if you don't have that listed, we could add it later.
I agree. That's very important. I don't know that it would have a separate voting member. Greg, do you have any thoughts on that? It is up.
I think that the unknown right now is the residents at large. And Kamali, to your point, I think that there might be some expertise that, and I think that's part of the charge of seeking membership to this school building committee. And I think that is one lens that we'd want to look at when thinking about the residents that are appointed to this school building committee.
Anything else, Kamali, or anyone else? All right, so I would entertain a motion to accept the charge as presented for a Town of Southborough NERI School Building Committee ad hoc, again, to be created as presented. And would there be a so moved and a second to that?
Roger, I'll make that motion. So moved.
Moved by Keturah.
I'll second, Jen.
Seconded by Jen. Any further discussion? All right, thank you. This would be a roll call vote. Keturah?
Yes.
Kamali?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. So that's unanimous. As I mentioned, I think the next step is that this will move to the select board to review and move forward. Am I correct on that in saying that, Greg?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So just a procedural. So Kathy and Jason, I'm going to move you back to attendees if you wish.
I was just raising my hand to properly adjourn, Greg, so I gladly go to attendee. So I'm going to move that the Town of Southborough Capital Planning Committee / School Research Subcommittee adjourn at 7:54 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Cook?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. Thank you all.
And thanks again.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody. Good night.
Hey, Jason. Good night, Kathy.
Thank you.
Good night.
We move to new business number 3, which is update from the principal. So I'll turn it back to you, Superintendent.
Yes, so this evening we have presentations or updates from our principals, and why don't we begin with Principal Ryan?
Thanks, Greg. We've been quite busy at the Finn School. We just finished access testing. I'd like to thank Rhoda Webb and the Finn's ELL team, Barbara Johnson and Deb Bagnami, for all their work and all the support they gave our students who are involved in our ELL program. Last Friday, we emailed report cards to parents. That's something new for us. I'd like to thank Julie Doyle and E.B. Perrin and the Finn teachers for making it happen without a single issue. This past Monday morning, E.B. Perrin and I presented to the Finn school staff an overview of the Massachusetts digital literacy and computer science standards, kindergarten through grade 2. In reviewing the standards, we all acknowledge that Finn has been fortunate to have technology to enhance student learning for a while now. And our students leave us with a great technological foundation to be built upon in their future grades. In our classrooms, we just finished celebrating the Chinese New Year, the Year of the Tiger, Groundhog Day, and now we're celebrating Black History Month. Classrooms are highlighting a famous African American each week and completing activities linked to this person. For example, students just learned about Wilma Rudolph, the 1960s world record gold medal winner in track and field. And now they're learning about Dr. Mae Jemison, the first Black woman to travel into space. We're also celebrating Southborough Kindness Week, and we're creating paper flower displays to drop off at the Southborough Town Hall in the Southborough Senior Center, and have a whole school challenge asking students in classes to accomplish 100 acts of kindness during the course of this week. And the number 100 is very popular at the Finn School this week, as tomorrow, Thursday, is the 100th day of school, and we have lots of fun activities planned around the number 100. We're also gearing up for Valentine's Day on Monday. In K in grade 1, students are learning about how-to writing, and Greg, Keith, and Stephanie were fortunate enough to see a couple of our teachers model how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and chocolate milk as a way to emphasize students' need for detail in their writing. Students are also conducting weather-related science experiments with snow, hypothesizing about how fast snow will melt indoors, causing a little extra work for Mr. Baba. We apologize for that. And we've also started to reach out to the Chestnut Hill Farm in preparation for the planting of our Finn family garden. We had a bountiful garden last year. All the vegetables were donated to the Southborough Food Pantry, and we're optimistic and hopeful that the same will happen for this year. Jeanette Morgan, our music teacher, connected with an incredibly talented violinist and Algonquin student, Shahana Shiv Rajan, and recruited Shahana to be a guest speaker for Tuesday afternoons via Zoom. Shahana talked all about her journey learning the violin and led some fun activities and showcased her incredible talent. So Finn parents, I apologize if your child comes home asking you to buy them a violin. Shahana is just that inspirational in what she presents. And we're also looking at more partnerships with the high school as our students really look up and love the idea of older kids coming into our schools. And it's a mutually beneficial opportunity for kids socially, emotionally, and academically. And lastly, we're excited about a dance-a-thon fundraiser scheduled for the last part of March through our SOS, and more information to come on that. And that's the Finn update.
Roger, on mute.
Oops, I am on mute, thanks. Well, I'll say thank you off mute to Clayton. And are there any questions? Okay.
All right, next we'll move to Mr. Mucci.
Thanks, Superintendent Martineau. So to echo Clayton's sentiments, we successfully completed WIDA testing last week. And I just want to thank Rhoda and the entire ELD team, especially Cassie Pearsall and Deb Bignami, who conducted the testing and worked with our ELL students at Woodward. Last week, we also had our second grade students participate in the second program of High Touch, High Tech, sponsored by our SOS. So we're extremely grateful to SOS and all of our parents for fundraising and to help sponsor programs like these. Grade 3 will be looking forward to their upcoming program in the next month or two. Like Principal Ryan and the Finn School, Woodward staff have been participating in Kindness Week. And we linked this to our care theme of the generosity for the month of February. So for that, we're currently running a food drive for the Southborough Food Pantry. And in addition to items being donated to the school or donated to the food pantry, we've also encouraged students to participate in thank you card and letter writing to the employees and the volunteers of the Southborough Food Pantry to thank them for the work that they do for the greater community. We've also presented students with daily challenges during our morning announcements and part of our morning meetings and classroom discussions. Each day we have a different challenge for students to participate in. And it's really just to encourage the idea of kindness and generosity and paying things forward. On Monday, we had Manners Monday, where we encourage students to say things like please and thank you and excuse me and show good table manners in the cafeteria, holding the door for classmates and teachers, really just showing good manners all around. Tuesday was Thank You Tuesday. So it's thanking people who you may not regularly thank for the job that they do or for how they contribute to you in your day. So it's thanking parents, siblings, teachers, classmates, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, really just sharing the message of thanks. On Wednesday, today was What Can I Do to Help Wednesday? So hopefully all of our Woodward students at home asked their parents what they could do, helping to pick up their room or take care of a sibling or to help prepare dinner. We encouraged it. I hope it happened. We'll take a tally tomorrow morning to see if that homework was actually completed tonight. Tomorrow is Thoughtful Thursday, and there we're just encouraging students to reach out to a grandparent or loved one and send a kind message or a kind word to hopefully brighten their day. And then Friday is Friendship Friday, and we're encouraging students, whether they be on the bus or on the playground, to reach out to a student that they might not typically spend time with and try to make a new friendship there. We're continuing these themes in our classrooms as well. In ELA, we're linking kindness to opinion writing, where students are sharing what it means to be a good friend and what qualities exist in a friend. And then we're also connecting that to Valentine's Day, where students are writing notes of appreciation and gratitude towards their classmates. So that's all I have for the update for Woodward, and I pass it over to Principal Valenti. Oh, unless there's any questions for Woodward, I'm sorry about that.
No, thank you. Don't see any hands up.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mucci. Like Woodward and Finn, we finished our access testing, and a big thanks to Rhoda Webb and Hope Cross for them taking the lead on this. It went really smoothly thanks to their organization throughout the entire process. We too sent our report cards out on Friday, and a big thank you to Julie, but more importantly, a huge thank you to our staff, our teachers. This was a new process for us, and they really collaborated well together in order to get those out on time to all families. Last week was World Read Aloud Day. Super exciting. We had 9 authors read throughout the entire day. They Skyped in with our students. And as I had mentioned before, the SOS provided each classroom with a collection from at least 1 book from each of the authors, if not 2. Thank you to Jen Torrio and Kristen Tev for leading this. We too are celebrating Kindness Week. Some of the things that we're doing each day, classrooms are playing a kindness video. We're creating in the 4th grade Valentine compliments. It's a project that they've done for numerous years. It's a great way to compliment classmates. We're having kindness bingo on Friday. We finished our 365Z Valentine cards as well as our Southborough Senior Center cards, and those were delivered yesterday so that they could be packed into their meals that were being delivered this week. And then on Friday, we are having a Spirit Day, and it's called Team Up for Kindness, and reminding and encouraging students to be the I in kind. In connection to our theme of the month of Black History Month, in the art room, Mrs. Johnson introduced the students to Kendi Wiley, who is a famous Black artist from New York and LA. He uses signs of the heroic and powerful and majestic in his representation of urban Black and brown men found throughout the world. NERI students were fortunate enough to be able to study copies of this artist's work and then created self-portraits, including all 7 elements of art. So those are hanging in our hallways. And if you want to check them out on our Facebook or Twitter page, you can see what they look like. In connection to Goal 1, empowering learners, Miss Valverde Collado, who was our world language teacher, used technology to enhance lessons this week in connection to kindness. Students were able to create virtual kindness jars where they placed kind words about their classmates and then translated those words into Spanish. She also used a new tech tool to assess student learning called Blookit. And this was in connection to their author study by the author Kino, who created Mafalda, and it's a comic book which is very popular in Europe. So our students have been reading those comics and learning more about the author. In connection to goal 2 of our school improvement plan, equity of opportunity, as a staff this week, we continued our whole staff book study. We Got This by Cornelius Minor, and this was chapter 3 and 4. And in our small groups, our discussions focused on identifying changes or practices we feel that need to happen, ways to show students that we hear them, and designing feedback tools for students, and understanding the importance of class meetings. And for goal 3, healthy and balanced learners, at our upcoming school council meeting, I'm going to be sharing an overview of CASEL and the work we're doing as a school in connection to the frameworks. I do want to celebrate the shift back to small groups. It's had such a positive impact on our students and teachers. I was able to observe whole class meetings this week and actually watch in Mrs. Gardula's class, they played Pass the Chicken, which was highly entertaining. The kids loved it, but it was just a great celebration of being able to come together. And it was wonderful to see in each classroom, student collaboration, teachers working in small groups, and just a general great sense of what a typical classroom looks like and should be like. So all in all, a great week at NERI, and thanks for listening. Any questions?
I see any hands up. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Hi, Principal Harshak.
Okay, I will continue to talk about Kindness Week. We were a little bit ahead of the week, but we recognize our cafeteria staff. A credit to my administrative assistant, Darlene Scorzelli, who came up with a wonderful idea of having students write kind notes to our staff on paper plates. The paper plates were displayed around the cafeteria with messages including, "I could eat gravy and meatballs for the rest of my life. Bellissimo. Thank you for not questioning some unhealthy snack choices. You are awesome, and you are so kind, and you always make me smile." So it was really a touching tribute to our cafeteria staff. Recently, Mr. Martineau was touring Trotter the other day, and he was met by 2 7th grade students who gave him some unsolicited advice about school day closures via email. He had the opportunity to speak to them, and Greg invited the students to be part of the 3:30 conversation when he had to make that call. They respectfully declined. I share these 2 anecdotes because when people ask me why I work in a middle school, I think these exchanges and this work really kind of highlights, the creativity and the sense of humor our students have. There was a return of students to our basketball games this past week. Students packed in the barn. I assume that had something to do with the fact that we were the Rams, but Urban Dictionary defines that as, coming out to a stadium for a big game. And we were able to defeat Milliken this time because the refs were fair. And then just in general, the planning has begun for volleyball club, our volleyball marathon, an outdoor dance for students in the spring, the night of song for our chorus, and a performance of Annie Jr. and 8th grade banquet. I think these are all great signs of spring and things to come for Trotter as part of our school culture. Just some systems and structures elements. Our crisis team had met recently to do a tabletop exercise to review school readiness. And we're also planning our second Alice drill come this March. Like my colleagues mentioned, we also disseminated our report cards in a new format via PowerSchool. This was a large undertaking because over 400 individual emails needed to be sent out with access codes for families. And we sent those out on the report card portal was open on Friday. And by Monday, we recognized about 85% of our parents or families had accessed that portal. So that was a big success. We're also preparing for our March conferences, in which we'll have a hybrid format where we'll allow parents to meet in person and in Zoom. Trotter is organizing an online math tutoring program called FEV Tutoring. We have invited about 30 students to participate. We're still working out the process, but we'll have a Trotter staff member oversee and proctor the program, but students will engage into one-on-one tutoring. And this is still taking shape, but we'll maybe have a session before school and a session after school, and we hope to launch after February break. Our work on restorative practices, which I highlighted last week, is continuing. We're really trying to shift the mindset of our staff that consequence does not always mean punishment when students are not meeting expected behaviors. We had a great working session with the staff from Milliken and Algonquin to refine our work in this area and to bolster our own toolbox in working with students. And lastly, I do want to preview some work that's taking place in our social studies classes, namely in our 8th grade classes. We are embarking upon the 8th grade civics project. Students will be responsible to put really learning into action. They are going to need to examine a community issue, identify the issue, research the issue and investigate the issue, develop an action plan, take part in an action plan, and reflect on the work. This project comes in a couple of different formats. It can be a class project where a class will choose 3 or 4 topics, or it could be an individual project as well with principal approval. Just across the state, some sample projects. I believe Lowell had a project where students had advocated to improve the city's website for young people to find free mental health resources. Another town had also conducted a social media campaign to address e-cigarettes and vaping. So I'm meeting with 2 8th grade students this week. I'm excited about their proposals and see where the work goes. I'm hopefully come May or June, we can round back with school committee and share some of the work in our 8th grade social studies classes.
Well, I do have a comment. Thank you, Gary. Before I see if anyone else has their hand up, I'd like to commend you on cleverly positioning any future Milliken wins as being tied to officiating. Nicely put.
Thank you.
Molly.
I didn't have any questions after each of your updates, but I'll just kind of summarize a couple of points that stood out. For Finn School, I think that's a great use, having the high schoolers come back into the school and speak with the young people, because it lets them know that, they can see that they can achieve that. It's not so distant and far away from them. And then I loved what's happening at the Woodward School, the themes that are happening. And I'll definitely think like Wednesdays, what can I do to help, should be like every day of the week. So I'm gonna work on that in my house. And then for all of the schools, because I'm connected to each of a parent or myself have a child there, the work that the art teachers are doing around the themes, as well as specifically just, every month, but this month's theme of Black history is outstanding. So I just wanna commend them all for the thoughtful projects they're doing there. And the whole staff book study, Kathleen, that you talked about, where we've talked a lot about for books for students, but I'm glad to hear that there's this collaborative effort around the teachers. So you guys can build community as well. So that's great. And then, for Trotter, the basketball game is definitely a lot of a conversation around that. The students are happy that that's back. And then I'll tell you that the volleyball interest is very high in the community. So I hope that that does happen this year. Yeah, and the 8th grade civics project, I'm looking forward to hearing what comes out of that. It's just really so many positives, and I'm just glad to see all the progress that's being made. So continue, great job. Thanks for sharing.
Katura.
Thank you. Well, you know, I love these updates, and it's just so wonderful to hear all the positive things happening in the schools. I just wanted to make an overall comment, which is that I am just really impressed, and I think it's wonderful that the adjustments are being made in the classrooms now that we're sort of, you know, COVID's been having its sort of ebbs and flows and all of that. And I think the responsiveness of sort of, you know, making adjustments back to what we want things to be as we're sort of trending in that direction. And hopefully there'll be more of that as we move forward. But I think that's great that that's already happening in the classrooms. And I think it's a great job staying on top of it as it happens. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Then I thank you all also. I think we're moving on to COVID-19 update.
Sure, I will begin and then I will turn it over to Mary Ellen. So as it was reported earlier, the state did make an announcement today that it will not be extending its masking restriction beyond February 28th, leaving the masking decision at a local level. So in terms of Southborough School Committee's kind of work and thinking about what is in the best interest of students in the Southborough community, the policy subcommittee will be meeting on February 15th at 4:15 to discuss the masking policy or the face covering policy. That will be a joint meeting with the medical advisory team so we can hear its input and feedback. My thinking is, and I'm working with Roger on this, that we will have a special school committee meeting on Thursday, February 17th, for the sole purpose of discussing masking. The next meeting after this evening for the Southborough School Committee is March 9th, which is obviously after the February 28th date. And I think it's important that the school committee and the district takes a position before the 28th. So at this point in time, Mary Ellen will share where we are in terms of our dashboard, vaccination rates, and answer any questions. And also just wanted, Dr. Safdar Medina is with us here to answer any questions as well. So Mary Ellen.
Thanks, Greg. Can you just confirm the dates of those meetings? It's Tuesday, February 15th, correct?
Yes, February 15th at 4:15.
Okay, thank you.
Did I say July 15th?
Wishful thinking. I thought I heard 14th, so I just wanted to know that we weren't spending our Valentine's Day all together. We'd be on our own. Do I have the ability to share my screen, please? Thank you. So as you all know, the COVID dashboard is available. It's updated daily with our daily case counts and weekly. This is hot off the press, just updated this afternoon. And this is available for anybody. If there is something that you don't understand on here, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Up in the corner is the daily positive case count, and it has classroom case counts too that are updated daily. So you can look at your classroom and see what's going on in the school. So we'll just maybe click on NERI and see what it shows here. Hopefully it's really linked and updated. It'll give the information for the prior week, the totals, and then each day this week. So NERI right now has had 0 cases so far this week. Last week they had 2 cases. One was in 4th grade in Ms. Hearn's class, and one was a staff member. So this information is there for everybody so you can track it. We are not contact tracing anymore, as many of you know. So it's contact tracing, not as we know it. So you won't be getting emails if you're close contact, but the nurses are still tracking things, and contact tracing would be done at their discretion. If there was a high risk situation or if there was a cluster of cases in a certain classroom, then we would contact Trace and make the recommendations based off of that. So this is available. This keeps expanding. It was a 4-week positive cases over the past 4 weeks, but I think it's nice for everybody to see what's happened over the past 2 months because it has been significant, as we all know. So our cases have dropped off each week, which is wonderful. Our case count this week was 36 compared to 52 last week. Southborough is in the yellow, and it's the top number here. It's 8. So last week, Southborough had 8 cases. And then our year-to-date cases, this is our year-to-date positive cases. As you can see, if you looked at the town data or the state data, we resemble what's happening everywhere right now. Our vaccination rates are slowly creeping up each week, so which is nice to see. And our Trotter is at the 82%, and all of the other schools are close behind. In the mid to high 70s. I did separate at Finn, preschool and K-1, because the preschoolers, most of them are not even eligible to get vaccinated yet, but that is soon to be changed. So those numbers will increase too, as they're working on vaccinating our under 5, 6 months to under 5 soon. We'll be getting information on that. And clinics about that are already in process with our boards of health. They're amazing. We will be notifying people of any upcoming clinics, and they're in the plans. So our screening and testing, we are continuing with our pooled screening on Mondays, and our positive results from that are dropping steadily also. This week we had 8, we had 1,546 tests that we did, and we had 8 positive tests from there. Test and stay wound down last week, and we had our final 10 that we did with no positives, and then symptomatic testing will continue. We had less symptomatic people that we were testing too. We did have 1 positive person that was symptomatic. What we're adding to our testing program this week is our weekly at-home antigen testing, which if you had opted in, you received your test kit already, and the recommendation is to do it either on Wednesday night or Thursday morning. And this is just adding in another form of testing to our already pooled surveillance testing. Symptomatic testing is available at the schools for people who become symptomatic during the school day. If you become symptomatic at home, you should not come to school to get a test, but you can call the nurse, and we could talk about using an antigen test or doing a drive-by, but please do not send or come to school for the staff if you are not feeling well, if you're symptomatic. So then we have our town data, which is everything's getting lower and lower each week, which is wonderful to see. We're still, the numbers are still high, but they are dropping exponentially each and every day. There's lots of resources on the dashboard that you could go to also for all of the testing protocols, what to do if you're positive, and the resource guide for parents. So this is on the district website. It's in Mr. Martineau's, linked in Mr. Martineau's newsletter each week. And I am happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Sorry. Questions? I see Katharine's got her hand up. I also wonder if there's anybody who wants a little more background on the shift from stay at home to the antigen testing. Katura.
I was just wondering if if you participate in the pool testing, do you get notified is it like no news is good news, or do you get notified that the results are back so you don't have to keep wondering if the other shoe is about to drop or something like that?
The pool testing is a no news is good news. The only reason you get notified is if you are in a positive pool, no matter what member you are of the positive pool. If you are the 4 negative people or the positive person, you will get notification because you had an individual test. So they do report on any individual test that was done. The other people who get notified is if the pool is invalid for any reason, which happens sometimes for machinery error, the lab error or whatever. If it comes up invalid, they will test each sample individually. So you would get notified for that. Our turnaround times have been really quick, and we had all our results by yesterday afternoon by 4:30, which was just about 24 hours from the time we sent off our last batch of tests. So it's pretty amazing. And so lately, I would say that we had a time when it was delayed, when we had the surge and there were lots of positive cases. But the past 2 weeks, it's been just about 24 to 28 hours we've had all of our results in. So if you don't hear by then, no news is good news.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Kim.
Marilyn, thanks for that walk through the dashboard. I have just a quick question, wondering how many students are participating in the at-home? How many students opted in for that?
So far, we have about 900.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. That's it. Yay for less COVID.
Molly?
Can you speak a little bit to about masking? I don't know if there's reference points, but how would you talk about possibly removing that mandate for students in a staggered approach, like would you start from the littles first and move up to the high school range, or go the reverse way, which is high schoolers down, or does it matter? Have you read or seen anything about that?
I have. Well, I'll start to answer that. We are revising and rescinding the mask policy. Each district has a mask policy. Has been a discussion at the regional level, the high school level, since October, November. So we have had lots of discussions about what would our criteria be to meet that, so that we would be able to remove the mask safely. So logically, I would think, since that's a discussion's been going on, it would start there. And then we would, because there are mask policies, they need to be reviewed by the policy subcommittee and either voted to be rescinded or revised by the school committee. So that's what all the extra meetings will be about next week, to talk about that, so we are prepared when it happens. I think we need to, as we are lifting some mitigation that we have employed all these strategies all along, we need to think about the things that, we've amped up our testing a little bit, so people who feel like they need to have that extra test during the week have the ability to do that. We still are doing, like hand washing and HEPA filters and the air quality control, and all of those things are still happening. And it's going to be important that vaccination is still a key factor, key mitigation factor, and staying home if you're symptomatic is a key mitigation factor also. So we have to remember all those things that we do have in place, and the medical advisory team will be looking at the data. We do look at it weekly. Like, there's data that we look at that we don't report on, like absenteeism and things like that, that would impact, staff absenteeism and student absenteeism, because our goal is to keep our students in school. So absenteeism is a nice data point to look at.
Mm-hmm. And Mary Ellen, would the nursing team or the school psychologists be open to and prepared to have discussions if there's a change in our masking policy in the schools, the same way that we did one when we started this 2 years ago, and we kind of had conversations to kind of mentally and talk to the students about you know, hey, you don't approach one student because they're doing it this way or that way. Now we're gonna do, you know, do we have the opportunity to do the reverse, which is, although your state has removed the policy, and now your school may or may not remove the policy. If someone elects to do that, I guess I think that it would be helpful if those conversations were had, right? So there'll probably be a general email shared with families, but just in the classroom, hey, middle schoolers, you know, and if one person decides one choice and another person decides a different choice, we're still going to act appropriately.
I think definitely that would happen, Kamali. That would be a thing that would be done individually at each school with their school psychologists, their nurses, their behavior specialists, their guidance, their adjustment counselors. And I think we have to think about it as it's going to be a lessening of masks. It's not going to be no masks. Right? So you need to wear a mask on the bus because that's a federal law. So any transportation, school transportation, people still need to be masked. You need to wear a mask in the health office. So the nurses will be fully masked all the time because it is a healthcare setting. So we are required to wear a mask, and anybody that enters the health office will be required to wear a mask. People who are returning after a 5-day quarantine or isolation, a shortened quarantine or isolation of 5 days, on day 6 to 10, they're required to wear a mask. If people have symptoms and are eligible to be at school, meaning they have tested negative and have symptoms, it's recommended, highly recommended, that they continue to wear a mask until their symptoms completely resolve. So we have to think about this as a lessening of masks. So there'll be people wearing masks for many different reasons, whether it's personal choice or because they have to wear it. So I think that it will be, I know that Clayton and Steve and Kathleen and Gary, their teams will work with the students, and it'll all tie into, you know, what's expected, right? And what's not expected, and that we all make choices depending on what's going on in our lives elsewhere or how comfortable we feel with the mask, you know, or removing it, or what our parents asked us to do. So there's going to be a lot of discussions that are made at the right levels.
Okay.
Ann?
I just wanted to, I guess, echo some of what Kamali was saying, and, you know, request to, and I'm sure that the medical advisory committee is doing this, but to have someone who has expertise in mental health be involved in some of those decisions, particularly because there's some questions in the community about whether or not wearing masks is a mental health problem for kids. On the other side, there's some research that shows that, you know, kids who don't get anxiety if they look different or they're wearing something different than other kids. And so I think dealing with some of those issues that might come up if policies are changed, and now we have a situation where some kids have masks, some kids don't. So having that kind of expertise or feedback is in part of this process, I think will be helpful.
We definitely can add Jennifer Lipton O'Connor to the policy meeting on Tuesday. I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Other questions?
Saftar's here if anybody has any other questions, or if you have anything to add, Saftar. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Saftar.
No problem. No problem. Happy to answer any questions, though, if there are any.
So Roger, can I just summarize that the policy subcommittee meeting is Tuesday, February 15th, 4:15 virtual, and it will be a webinar, so anyone can attend and listen in if they so choose. And again, it will be a joint meeting, and members of the medical advisory team will be participating as well as we work through the policy. And then secondly, if the committee, it's the will of the committee, the plan is to have a joint special school committee meeting with the Northborough School Committee on Thursday, February 17th, for the sole purpose of discussing masking and the policy.
Please.
I just had a question. Are community members able to submit questions, or what if they have, or is that would be coming up for the school committee audience sharing? I'm guessing, I'm just wondering at what point can we hear feedback from concerned parents?
So I guess one question I have is, and we did discuss this on the medical advisory team yesterday, was is there an interest for of the committee to have me survey parents and collect data? I think giving parents a voice is very important, and actually it would give us some good data of where the community sits on this topic. So I guess I would pose that question to the committee. Is the committee interested in having me survey families on their thoughts and ideas around masking after February 28th?
I think parents' voice is critically important, and I would certainly support a communication that there was a survey to find out what parents were thinking. Dan, are you still up, or shall I move on to some other hands?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, I actually, just to follow up with that survey, I mean, I think what would be helpful is for the medical advisory too, to have a sense of what are the most pressing concerns that parents might have if we were to change the policy. And, you know, as you guys are the medical experts and going through the research, be able to address potentially some of those concerns too. So not just surveying parents about what they think about it, but saying, well, and what are the concerns that you have and how can we address these based in research?
Okay, Kim?
I agree with what Jen just said. I think that sort of a combination, like this is where we are from the medical advisory team, with a survey of our community is like a perfect way to like get some, you know, good data on what's going on. And Softar, do you will you come to that meeting on Tuesday? Do you guys plan on having a recommendation, or just do you plan on coming to the policy meeting with a recommendation?
I can I think it would be
Amelia.
So those would be Greg and Safdar and myself and everybody else on the medical advisory team. We are having a bonus meeting, we called it, to the date to be determined, to be prepared to come to that meeting with a recommendation. Because our meeting is not scheduled for the same day, usually at 4 o'clock. So we are in the process of scheduling a meeting prior to that so that we would come with their recommendations of you know, what would be the safest way to do this.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you.
Molly?
Yeah, I think you were just going, do you want to go through each member to, well, I'll just say that, yes, I support doing a parent survey, and, you know, the purpose is to allow people that want to have a voice to share their voice. And then combine it with the information that we have from, you know, the advisory team and the research that's available. So I do support that.
Yeah, I think it's one input, but I think it's an important input, right? Obviously there's multiple input sources that go into this. And I assume we have no disagreement that a survey would be beneficial. Let me go back to look at, I don't see any other hands up. Kamali, are you all set? Let me make a comment. So one of the things that I reflected on, Mr. Garanghelli's audience share, you know, I reflected on the fact that those of us that are, so I knew that there would not, as did others, that there wouldn't be any action on the governor's announcement today at this meeting tonight. There's a process And so maybe those of us that are too close to it, knowing that there wasn't going to be any action on it, and the action was going to be really focused on next week, there wasn't a lot to say. However, I do think that upon reflection, if I had it to do over again, even though Superintendent Martineau only had a few sentences, to talk about what was going to happen next week, I probably would have invited that couple of sentences to occur earlier in the meeting, just so there wouldn't be stress about what the school committee was going to do, because we weren't going to do anything tonight, but at least alleviating some concern about that by having those couple of overview sentences earlier in the meeting, so that folks would realize that this is really going to be a topic for next week. I think I would, if I had that to do over again, I would do it over again. And I sort of thank Mr. Garanghelli for kind of pointing that out. Other comments on Jen?
I just, not to like belabor the point, but I just wanted to point out with this idea of a parent survey and what we have as a medical advisory committee, I think it's, there's a lot of like emotional opinions about this issue on either side. And so when we talk about a parent survey, for me, I think just the question of, should your kid wear them, or should we get rid of the mask mandate versus not get rid of that information is less helpful, I think, than really hearing what are the concerns on both sides, and then being able to provide parents the information to understand and maybe either hopefully make their concerns better, but be able to make a decision based on us understanding what the concerns are in the community and the concerns are for kids, and using our medical advisory committee and the expertise that we have there to drive that, but while also considering the concerns. So I think those two things are important, but I just wanted to say, in terms of a parent survey, us being able to really understand the concerns as opposed to just, should we do this, should we not do this, I think is helpful.
No, and Jen, I do agree. I think that the purpose of the survey needs to be very clear in how the data will be used or not used. And I think it does need to be more than just yes or no masks or no masks. So I will work with the leadership team to craft a survey that we think will provide us that type of data that will be helpful for the medical advisory team and us district leaders to make the right decision for students and the community.
Kim?
Yeah, I have something similar to say. I think it could not just be not helpful, but hurtful to have a yes, no. I think it's really important for us to have like open-ended, what are the concerns of the community, so that we can address it. So I guess that's,
yeah, Kim, I will share that is a concern of mine. I mean, I think, this topic can be very polarizing. There is a continuum of beliefs, and people have strong beliefs one way or the other. And I think that is a concern that I have, is if the survey is not carefully crafted, that it can actually be more divisive and fracture the community than actually be helpful. So that is, I think, part of the work that we'll need to do as a leadership team to be thoughtful about it.
And I think the leadership team, as well as the school committee, is very interested in the concerns, though, of our community. So like, if we can just get that and then take the next step, that'd be great.
All right. We good? I don't see any other hands up. All right, well, thank you. Legislative updates.
So no significant updates at this time. I think the governor's budget FY23 House 2 budget has been released, as folks know. So I think the advocacy that we'll move forward with under Becky's leadership is really making sure Chapter 70 funding is at an appropriate level for Southborough, making sure circuit breaker reimbursement is again funded at an appropriate level, and also some advocacy around inflation. So Chapter 70 is currently funded at an inflation rate of 4.5%, and there's some discussions and advocacy around funding it at a 5.9% inflation rate, because that's actually the true inflation rate. So those are the three areas that Becky and her team and I will be thinking about how we can draft some letters for the school committee to consider and advocate from its legislative body.
Right. MSBA Accelerated Repair Program, and I know we need a vote tonight.
Sure. So just a brief update. So we heard a lot about MSBA earlier in the meeting. MSBA has two programs: the core building program, which is the program that we submitted the SOI for Neary Elementary School, and it also has its accelerated repair project, which is specifically designed for boilers, windows, and roofs. So Keith has spent a lot of time drafting two statements of interest for the Trotter Middle School roof and the Finn School roof. And as part of the process of submitting a statement of interest to MSBA, it requires a school committee vote and support and a parallel process at the select board level. And the select board will also have to engage in a similar vote and approval to show community support. So I do have language that Mr. Lavoie provided us this evening. So just give me 1 second. And we will need to read this exact language into the record for the motion. And then I have a parallel motion for Finn School.
So is that the entire, is that the?
This is Trottier's motion, and then,
right. Okay,
and then
so
I have a separate Finn motion.
So that's the motion for Trottier in its entirety.
Correct.
So I could see it, and now okay, now I can still see it. All right. So let me just read the language. Resolved, having convened in an open meeting on February 9th, 2022, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the school committee of Southborough, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated February 2022 for the P. Brent Trottier Middle School, located at 49 Parkerville Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for replacement of the EPDM and pitched roof systems under priority number 5. The replacement of the 90,000 square foot roof system is necessary due to its age, ruptured seams, punctured membrane, and water damage, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Southborough to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So do I receive a so moved for that resolution? And
this is Kamali, so moved.
Motion by Kamali, is there a second?
Second, Kim.
Seconded by Kim. Is there any discussion on this? All right, this requires a roll call vote. Katura?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Kamali?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. It carries unanimously. To the next item.
Just give me 1 second and I will find the Finn. give me 1 second. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually find the motion.
So it sounds like just moving to submit a statement of interest for the Finn School roof won't cut it, huh?
No, sorry. And I did have it queued up. I'm not sure where it went, but hang on, it's all set now.
Is that in the is that in the packet or the your notes? Okay, there it is. Okay, let me read this, please. Resolved, having convened in an open meeting on February 9th, 2022, prior to the statement of interest submission closing date, the school committee of Southborough, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated February 2022 for the Mary E. Finn Elementary School located at 60 Richards Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for replacement of the EPDM and pitched roof systems under priority number 5. The replacement of the 84,000 square foot roof system is necessary due to its age, ruptured seams, punctured membrane, and water damage, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Southborough to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Do I hear a so moved for that resolution?
So moved, Jen.
Moved by Jennifer. Is there a second?
Second, Katura.
Seconded by Katura. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none. Roll call vote. Katura?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Kamali?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. It carries unanimously. Does that wrap up the new business? Mr. Superintendent, are we going on to old business?
It does wrap up new business. And
all right. So I guess if there's a brief update on the before and after school care program, that's what I have for the old business items.
sure. So turn it over to Mr. Lavoie.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to provide this update. I wanted to let the committee know that work is continuing to prepare to bring a before and after school program under the district's jurisdiction. We are working with the hiring process for the director of the program. We've made great gains in that process. We do not want to see any further delay. So we will be moving on that as quickly as possible. Simultaneously, we are working on the logistics behind the scene to make sure that we are ready to roll out once it is possible for registration, not only for a summer program, but for registration for the 2022-2023 school year. So we are excited about what we're about to embark on and the transition that is underway. And we should see something very shortly out to the community. And that is our plan going forward. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We are moving on to the superintendent's report.
So first in your packet is the enrollment document as of February 2nd, 2022. We are monitoring enrollment for the upcoming academic year very closely, and the Southborough leadership team is working on making sure we identify where we need to shift class sizes and so forth. So that work is underway. And I'll also add that we did add a row to include RLS demographic data that will be added to the enrollment report each month moving forward. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. If there are no questions, also in your packet is the FY22 monthly general fund expenditure report and grants update. And I will turn it over to Rebecca Pellegrino to provide a report update.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So as I mentioned last month, we are closely watching the substitute teacher line item. As you can see in your packet, as of the end of January, we have 14.7% of the budgeted funds for FY22 remaining in that particular line item. You'll also note that there was a decrease in our general supplies line item as a result of a district-wide purchase of copy paper at a substantially higher rate per case. Our nurse substitute line is just under the amount budgeted right now. We are continuing to watch this line since, as Clayton shared, we're 100 days into the school year and we have 80 more to go. And then lastly, you'll notice changes in the interscholastic coaches and extracurricular stipend line items for Trotter as we've encumbered those stipends for this fiscal year. So as of January 31st, 2022, we had $414,280 remaining, or 1.91% on the bottom line, in comparison to the same time last year where we had $265,027, or 1.25% remaining. And at this time, I have no concerns to report on the FY22 budget, and I welcome any questions.
Don't see any. Oh, Kim.
I have a quick question about the substitutes. We're using more substitutes. We were able to find enough substitutes. Like, are we still doing the building substitutes? What's happening?
Yes, we are still doing the building-based substitutes. We are seeing the numbers obviously decline in terms of the need for substitutes over the past few weeks. That number has gone down, but we are just very cautious in terms of watching our spending for the substitutes at this point in time. And I don't know if any of the principals have anything to share on the building-based subs and how that's working in their building.
Yeah, I can chime in. So having a building-based sub, that we can depend on and rely on for those last-minute absences has been crucial to the function of the building. We're incredibly grateful that we have that extra person, or in some cases, two people, depending on the day of the week. It's given us a great deal of flexibility to ensure that all the services that our students are entitled to are provided at the at the expected kind of rate and regularity.
I agree with Mr. Mucci, and it's the students who are getting to know these substitute teachers. They're in different classrooms. They're acclimating themselves to our community and becoming a part of the community. So it's been really helpful having them there, and they're growing in their practice too as a substitute teacher. So it's been a great addition to our staffing.
I would just add that at Finn, we're fortunate enough to have Southborough residents as our substitutes for building-based subs, and it makes all the difference in the world.
And lastly, we just spoke about this at our Southborough principals meeting, that this has really been game-changing for our systems and operations and our effectiveness for running schools. Our building-based subs have actually almost become like pseudo faculty members in some ways. Mm-hmm. Last year, without them, I can't even imagine how we would have functioned on certain weeks. So this has been a great addition, and hopefully one that we can carry on.
Awesome, thanks.
Other questions? Thank you. You'd like a vote on this?
Yes, please.
So I'd entertain a motion to accept the Southborough Public School District fiscal year 2022 budget monthly general fund expenditure report as of January 31st, 2022 until audited.
So moved by Kim.
So moved by Kim. Is there a second?
Second, Jen.
Seconded by Jen. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Keturah?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Kamali?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. It passes unanimously. It's back to you, Greg. This is on what, grants? Grants update?
So back to Becky.
Sorry, back to Becky. There you go.
Okay. All right, so tonight I'm also sharing an update on our spending under the ESSER grant funding that we have received. When I last presented in November, I did share that we had fully expended the first round of ESSER grant funding, which was just under $35,000, and that was used towards Chromebooks and iPads. If you recall, that was awarded to us during fiscal year 21. And since that grant is fully expended, I will not continue to report on ESSER 1. In terms of ESSER 2, this grant was awarded to the district in August of 2021 in the amount of $135,238. You'll notice that I've added a column to reflect the amended budget. Dr. Reinhorn and I have reviewed planned expenditures, and we were able to move some of these expenses onto some of our entitlement grants that we have available. So that's allowed us to allocate those funds to other areas of need. Our main expenditures year to date were stipends for our EL summer program, our work with Mass Insight Partnership, and also professional development that is planned for this March. So we have also purchased a math screening tool and student and staff devices, and we've ordered a new EL curriculum program for the elementary schools. And as a reminder, the ESSER 2 grant closes September 30th of 2023. In terms of ESSER 3, we received this grant in October of 2021. This grant totals $281,464. And as was mentioned in the principal's report, we are starting to utilize this grant for tutoring programs. 20% of this grant was required to be utilized to combat loss of instructional time and learning loss. And 20% of that does equal $42,348. And again, as a reminder, this grant does close on September 30th of 2024. We are beginning to work on the other areas that we have highlighted in the ESSER 3 grant and do expect to be moving forward some of these initiatives in the very short term. And I welcome any questions on the grants.
Don't see any hands up, so thank you for that. Number 4.
Yes, so just real quickly, the committee voted to close the Trotter student activity account at a prior school committee meeting, and this process is underway. And Becky is working with the town accountant and treasurer to accomplish this task. And what we need is a vote from the committee to remove Principal Hershuk from the checking account. And once reconciled, the town will close the account. And basically the motion language was in the superintendent's memo to the school committee, but I'm happy to share my screen and present that motion if the committee so wishes.
So I see. Here's the motion. All right. So I do see the motion. Or do I not see the motion?
So Roger, I can read it and someone could so move it.
That's fine. I'm looking on. I just see where it says vote to allow for the removal of Gary Hershak on the Southborough student activity bank account.
That's it. Yep.
Is that it?
Right? Yeah.
All right. So who so moved that?
That's Kamali.
Kamali, so moved by Kamali. Is there a second?
Second by Kim.
Second by Kim. Any discussion on this? Roll call vote. Katura,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Molly,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So that carries unanimously.
So the next item on the agenda is the capital plan, and the project for the FY23 school year is to pave the Mary E. Finn School parking lot. And we are looking for a motion to be allowed to expend money from the facility rental revolving account to fund the project. So I do have a motion that I would like to share.
So I'm looking for a motion, looking for a so moved, then that we move the committee, the committee moves to vote to utilize funds from the Southborough Public Schools Facility Rental Revolving Account for the Mary E. Finn School Paving Project.
So moved.
Katura, motion by
Kim. Roger.
Yes.
Oh, you're back. I think your mic was.
Something must be going on with my mic. I apologize. It is. So
I have a question. Did you ask for discussion?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I have a question. Kim.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Becky, can you just do a quick overview of what in that facility rental revolving account, where the money comes from?
So the facility rental revolving account comes from the rent that is paid to the Southborough Public Schools from Northborough and from the region for the central office space. It also includes the rent that is paid by Southborough Extended Day Program and any rent of our buildings such as Southborough Youth Basketball, and then other types of organizations that may utilize our building and pay rent for that. We also have a vendor, Assabet Valley Collaborative, who pays rent as well for locations within 2 of our schools. So those funds, since they are facility, we are allowed to utilize them for the upkeep of any of our buildings, and also the parking lots would be included in that.
Okay, thank you.
A roll call vote. Katura?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes, so that carries unanimously.
All right, next in your packet is the budget priorities for FY23 and the budget calendar. And I'll just highlight one date on the budget calendar, and that is March 1st. I've been asked to present to the select board. So I will be working with Roger to see if we need to post a joint meeting, depending on how many school committee members would like to attend that meeting. And lastly, on the superintendent's report is the FY23 recommended budget presentation and vote. So let me share my screen. So at the January meeting, I did present the FY23 recommended budget to the school committee and did ask the school committee to hold off on approving the budget as we had some more time since the town meeting date was moved outward. So that gave the principal and leadership team and I some more opportunities for discussion and input around the budget. I will not go through the entire presentation this evening, but I will just move to the most important component of the budget, which is the overall ask in terms of FY23. So in terms of the recommended budget, I did speak to the fact that it is a process over many months, and where we started in September and where we originally landed with a initial budget request was a little under $24 million. And as the result of many discussions and conversations with educators, principals, and faculty and staff, this evening we are recommending a budget of $22,283,443, which represents a 2.53% increase over fiscal year 22. In terms of the budget increases, so where are the budget increases? There are 4 areas where we're seeing increases: transportation, a slight increase, a little under $10,000, instructional hardware, and a little under $20,000. Maintenance of buildings and grounds, we're seeing some increase in some of our contracts. And lastly, the majority of our budget increase really centers around salary increases and COLAs, which is $490,152. And the sum is $549,009. In terms of budget offsets, so we have circuit breaker special education reimbursement, a little under $1 million. We did see some money from our Student Opportunity Act for circuit breaker special education transportation reimbursement for out-of-district transportation reimbursement. We also saw $403,083 in terms of leave of absences and educator retirements. And lastly, just some line item reductions. So the principals did a great job looking closely at their line items, looking at 5-year averages and really thinking about what they need. And those reductions resulted in $173,157. And the total for budget offsets is a little under $1.6 million. So again, in terms of the budget, recommended budget for FY23, the total amount is $22,283,443, which represents a 2.53% increase. For the most part, this is a level services budget. I would share with the committee and the community, though, we have a high level of services for our students. And this budget also includes a few growth areas. So in terms of those growth areas, this does fund an additional special education classroom to meet the needs of some students. And this is a shared classroom with Northborough pre-K through 8. And Southborough's portion of that teacher is a 0.5 FTE special education teacher. And then Southborough's budget also includes 3 educational support professionals to support the students that will be serviced in that program. Also a growth area is we're increasing our reading specialists to 0.2 FTE. And lastly, we are adding a 1.0 full-time equivalent reading tutor who will be shared between Finn and Woodward. And the total FTE is 4.7, and the sum is $171,348. And then lastly, in terms of a historical budget percent increase, I think over the past 6 years, the district has been very fiscally responsible in terms of budget requests. I think we've put forth fiscally responsible and educationally sound budgets. We've been able to grow programs, level service programs. And again, I think we have a high level of services that we provide our students and families. So at this point in time, I would be happy to answer any questions about the FY23 recommended budget.
I don't see hands up at the moment. Let's put the motion on the floor and then a second chance at any questions. So I would look for a motion to move that we accept the superintendent's recommended budget for the public schools of Southborough's fiscal year 2023 of $22,283,443, which is an increase of 2.53% or $549,009 from the fiscal year 22. There are so moved.
So moved, Jen.
Moved by Jennifer. Is there a second?
Second, Kim.
Seconded by Kim. Are there any questions on this at this point? Okay, roll call vote. Keturah?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Kamali?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. So the budget carries unanimously. And really a good job on this budget to keep it at this level and still provide needed services to the students. What's next?
Educational policy.
None at this time? All right. Policy development and or distribution, I don't see anything at this time either. Personnel items, I know the personnel report is in the packets. Superintendent, do you have anything to?
The only comment I would make is leave of absences. Helene Desjardins is now Assistant Director of Student Support Services. So we customarily, people who step up to be in leadership positions, we grant them a leave of absence for 1 year for their position that they vacated. So she's still with us, thankfully, and we're very excited to have her in her new leadership position.
Excellent. Anything on the communications item for this meeting, Greg?
I could provide a quick update. We are investigating a few communication firms. We've met with 2 communication firms thus far, Cheryl and me. We have 2 more meetings set in the next couple of weeks. I do plan on bringing forth a firm or 2 to present to the committee to think about how we could partner with a firm moving forward to enhance and improve communications across not only Southborough, but Northborough in the region as well. So more information to follow.
So that's great. Can't wait to hear more. I'm wondering, is that sort of built in already into that budget that we just approved?
It is, correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right, let's move. Another question?
We can't hear you, Roger.
So I cannot figure this out. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I see no more questions, so we'll move to action on the minutes. I think you all have received the corrected minutes for the open meeting of January 12th, 2022. Do you have any questions on those?
No.
Look for move to approve the corrected minutes.
Roger, I think you're.
Yeah. You know what? Right. Lean to the right. Lean the other way. The other way.
Can you hear me if I just
I'm a little closer,
but that way. Yeah.
I'll try
again.
That's
move.
Good. Don't move.
All right. I'll have to deal with the technical issues here at some point. So I'd look for a so move to approve the corrected minutes of the open meeting of January 12th, 2022 of the Southborough School Committee. There, so moved?
So moved. This is Kamali.
So moved by Kamali. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Katura. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote. Katura?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Kamali?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. It's approved unanimously. I think we're on to agenda items for next month. If anyone has any they want to put forth, Superintendent?
Yeah, so I have a couple. So the first is the public hearing for the budget. And then secondly, I have been talking with Dr. Reinhorn about having one of our members from the teaching and learning team come and present some of the work. And I think it will be ELA for the first meeting. Megan Kelty will present some of the work that's happening across the district. And then also Dr. Reinhorn will provide a professional development update. March 21st is the next professional development day, and a lot of time and energy has been spent. So she'll provide a report on what the committee can expect in terms of March 21st.
Anyone have anything they would, let's see, Jen?
Are we going to have by that time any potential updates on the after school or extended services program? And if so, if we can add that to the agenda. I don't know if we'll have updates yet, but.
Yes, we will have updates.
I think there may be a standing placeholder for updates there as we move through the next few months, but that's a good
oh yeah,
a good reminder. That's a good reminder, Jen. Anything else? All right.
Wait, yep. Is the equity audit next month?
Sorry.
Oh no, that's the combined. Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
I don't see any other hands up. All right, let's move on to the closing public comment. I'm looking at the attendee list. I do not see any hands up. So thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
So moved by
Jen.
Jen. Okay, sorry about that. And it's seconded by?
A second, Kim.
Seconded by Kim. There was a tie almost. All right, so moved and seconded to adjourn. Roll call vote. Katura?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
I vote yes. It's unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:23 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.